Hollywood made these stars incredibly wealthy. They owned mansions, signed million-dollar contracts, and built careers that shaped American entertainment. Yet if you visit their final resting places today, you won't find towering monuments or lavish mausoleums. Instead, you'll discover simple headstones, quiet crypts, and modest graves that reveal a very different ending. From Walt Disney to Marilyn Monroe, these are 15 millionaire Hollywood legends whose final resting places are far more humble than their fame ever suggested. Number 1. Walt Disney. Few people in Hollywood became as wealthy or influential as Walt Disney. He built an entertainment empire that transformed animation, created Disneyland, and turned Mickey Mouse into one of the world's most recognizable characters. By the time he died in 1966, his name was synonymous with success, making it easy to imagine that his final resting place would be just as grand. The reality is surprisingly different. After dying from complications of lung cancer at the age of 65, Disney was cremated, and his ashes were placed in the Disney family columbarium at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. Instead of a towering monument or an elaborate mausoleum, his resting place is marked by a small, understated memorial that quietly blends into the surrounding family niches. Without knowing exactly where to look, many visitors could walk past it without realizing the creator of the Disney empire rests there. The contrast is remarkable. The man who filled the world with castles, fairy tales, and larger-than-life dreams chose no extravagant memorial for himself. His final resting place reflects privacy rather than prestige. That simplicity also fits the man behind the company. Throughout his career, Disney repeatedly invested his fortune into ambitious projects that many believed would fail. His greatest passion was never creating monuments to himself. It was creating stories that would outlive him. And they did. Today, millions of people still visit Disney parks and watch the films he inspired, while his own grave remains quiet, modest, and far less extravagant than the empire he built. Perhaps that's the greatest irony of all. Walt Disney's biggest legacy was never carved into stone. It lives in the imagination of generations around the world. Number 2. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe became one of the biggest stars Hollywood has ever produced. Her films earned millions, her image became a global icon, and decades after her death, she remains one of the most recognizable faces in entertainment. Many people would expect someone with that level of fame to rest beneath a grand monument. Instead, her final resting place is surprisingly simple. After Monroe died in 1962 at just 36 years old, she was laid to rest in a small crypt at Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles. Rather than an elaborate mausoleum or towering memorial, her name appears on a modest bronze plaque, much like the many other crypts surrounding it. If not for the flowers left by admirers, there is little about the marker itself that reflects the extraordinary fame she achieved during her lifetime. That contrast is striking. The woman whose image still appears on posters, books, clothing, and museum exhibits around the world is remembered in death by a quiet, understated memorial hidden inside a peaceful cemetery. Yet perhaps that simplicity is fitting. Monroe spent much of her life trapped between the glamorous public image that made her famous and the private woman who longed to be taken seriously as an actress. Even after becoming one of Hollywood's highest-paid stars, she struggled to escape the persona others had created for her. Today, visitors from around the world continue to seek out her crypt, proving that her legacy never disappeared. But the place where Marilyn Monroe rests remains remarkably modest, a quiet reminder that even one of Hollywood's brightest stars left behind far less marble than memories. Number 3. Audrey Hepburn. Audrey Hepburn became one of Hollywood's most beloved stars, winning an Academy Award and building a career that made her a global symbol of elegance and grace. Even after leaving the spotlight, she remained admired for her humanitarian work with UNICEF. With a fortune earned through decades of film and fashion, many would expect her final resting place to be as glamorous as the life the world remembered. It isn't. After Hepburn passed away in 1993 at the age of 63, she was buried in the small village cemetery of Tolocanas, Switzerland, where she had spent her final years. Her grave is marked by a simple stone cross and a modest headstone surrounded by flowers, blending naturally into the peaceful countryside. There are no towering statues, elaborate sculptures, or lavish memorials, just a quiet place that reflects the private life she chose away from Hollywood. The contrast is striking. One of the most photographed women in history rests in a cemetery that feels more like a village garden than the final home of an international icon. That simplicity perfectly matches the woman she became later in life. After years of fame, Hepburn valued family, privacy, and humanitarian work far more than celebrity. She spent much of her final decade helping children around the world rather than seeking the spotlight. Today, admirers still travel to Tolokanaz to pay their respects. Yet her grave remains remarkably modest, proving that while Audrey Hepburn's beauty captivated millions, the peaceful life she embraced in the end was far simpler than the fame she left behind. Number 4. Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra wasn't just a legendary singer. He was also a Hollywood star, an Academy Award winner, and one of the highest-paid entertainers of his generation. His success brought him enormous wealth, making it easy to imagine that his final resting place would be marked by a grand memorial worthy of an icon. Instead, it is surprisingly understated. After Sinatra died in 1998 at the age of 82, he was buried at Desert Memorial Park in Cathedral City, California. His grave is marked by a simple flat bronze plaque set into the ground, far removed from the lavish image many associate with the chairman of the Rat Pack. Rather than an elaborate monument, visitors find a quiet memorial that blends naturally into the cemetery around it. Even the inscription reflects the man more than the superstar. Along with his name and dates, the marker includes the words, "The best is yet to come," the title of one of his most beloved songs. It's a personal touch instead of a display of wealth. That contrast is hard to ignore. Sinatra performed before sold-out crowds around the world, earned millions through music, films, and business ventures. Yet the place where he rests is modest and dignified rather than extravagant. Today, fans still travel to his grave, leaving flowers, coins, and small mementos in tribute. But despite his extraordinary fortune and larger-than-life career, Frank Sinatra's final resting place quietly reminds visitors that lasting fame doesn't always end with a lasting monument. Sometimes a simple stone and a familiar song are enough to tell the story. Number 5. John Wayne. John Wayne became the face of the American Western. With dozens of hit films, Academy Award recognition, and decades as one of Hollywood's biggest box office stars, he earned a fortune that made him one of the industry's most successful actors. Many would expect a larger-than-life monument for a man known as the Duke. Instead, his grave is remarkably modest. After Wayne died from stomach cancer in 1979 at the age of 72, he was buried at Pacific View Memorial Park in Newport Beach, California. His resting place is marked by a simple flat bronze plaque set into the grass, overlooking the peaceful landscape. There are no towering statues, elaborate sculptures, or grand mausoleums to celebrate one of Hollywood's greatest legends. What surprises many visitors even more is that for nearly 20 years his grave had no public marker at all. The family chose to leave the site unmarked, making it almost impossible for fans to identify where he was buried. Only later was the modest bronze plaque added, bearing his name along with a quiet inscription that reflected his personal philosophy rather than his celebrity. The contrast is striking. On screen, John Wayne played fearless heroes who seemed larger than life. In death, however, his final resting place is calm, understated, and easy to overlook. Today, admirers still visit Pacific View to honor his legacy. Yet despite the wealth, fame, and unforgettable characters he brought to the screen, John Wayne rests beneath one of the simplest memorials of any Hollywood icon, proving that even the biggest legends sometimes leave behind the quietest graves. Number 6. Humphrey Bogart. Humphrey Bogart became one of Hollywood's greatest legends through classics like Casablanca, The Maltese Falcon, and The African Queen. His unforgettable performances made him one of the industry's highest-paid actors, and his name remains synonymous with the golden age of Hollywood. For someone of such lasting fame, many people expect an impressive monument. Instead, his final resting place is surprisingly understated. After Bogart died of esophageal cancer in 1957 at the age of 57, he was cremated, and his ashes were placed in the Columbarium of Eternal Light at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. Rather than a grand mausoleum or elaborate memorial, his name is marked by a modest bronze plaque among many other memorial niches. Without knowing its exact location, it's easy to walk past without realizing one of Hollywood's greatest stars rests there. The contrast is remarkable. The man whose face helped define film noir and romantic cinema occupies only a small space inside a quiet columbarium, far removed from the larger-than-life image audiences still remember. Perhaps that's fitting. Bogart never seemed interested in glamour for its own sake. His greatest legacy wasn't a lavish estate or an extravagant monument, but the unforgettable characters he brought to life on screen. Today, movie lovers continue to visit Forest Lawn to pay their respects, yet despite his enormous success and enduring influence, Humphrey Bogart's final resting place remains simple, dignified, and far more modest than the legendary career that made him immortal. Number 7. Clark Gable. Clark Gable was known as the King of Hollywood. With unforgettable performances in films like Gone with the Wind and Decades as one of MGM's biggest stars, he earned immense wealth and worldwide fame. A man with a title like that might be expected to rest beneath a magnificent monument fit for Hollywood royalty. He doesn't. After Gable died from a heart attack in 1960 at the age of 59, he was laid to rest inside the Great Mausoleum at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. Although the mausoleum itself is an impressive building, Gable's personal memorial is surprisingly simple. His crypt is marked by a modest bronze nameplate, resting beside the crypt of his beloved wife, Carole Lombard. There are no towering statues or elaborate tributes celebrating the man once called Hollywood's king. That quiet simplicity carries even greater meaning because of Lombard. Her tragic death in a plane crash in 1942 devastated Gable, and those closest to him believed he never fully recovered from the loss. Years later, he was buried beside her, making their shared resting place a far more personal tribute than any grand memorial could have been. The contrast is unforgettable. The actor who ruled Hollywood's golden age is remembered not by an extravagant monument, but by a simple bronze marker honoring the person he loved most. Today, visitors still come to Forest Lawn to pay their respects, yet Clark Gable's final resting place remains remarkably understated. For the man once crowned the King of Hollywood, his greatest legacy was never the title itself. It was the timeless films he left behind and the quiet place where his remarkable story came to an end. Number 8. Lucille Ball. Lucille Ball wasn't just one of television's biggest stars. She was also a successful businesswoman who co-founded Desilu Productions, the studio behind I Love Lucy, and several other classic television series. Her success made her one of the wealthiest and most influential women in entertainment. So many people expect her final resting place to reflect that extraordinary career. Instead, it is remarkably simple. When Ball died in 1989 at the age of 77, she was initially buried at Forest Lawn, Hollywood Hills in California. But several years later, her family honored her lifelong connection to her hometown by moving her remains to Lakeview Cemetery in Jamestown, New York. There, she rests beneath a modest family headstone, far removed from the glamour of Hollywood. The contrast is striking. The woman who helped revolutionize television and built a production company worth millions chose not to remain in Hollywood at all. Rather than an elaborate memorial surrounded by celebrities, her grave sits quietly in the town where her story began. That choice feels fitting. Although Lucille Ball spent decades making millions laugh on screen, she never forgot her roots. Returning to Jamestown reflected the private side of a woman the world mostly knew through comedy and fame. Today, fans still travel to her hometown to pay their respects. Yet despite her enormous success, Lucille Ball's final resting place remains modest and deeply personal, a reminder that for some Hollywood legends, home ultimately mattered more than Hollywood itself. Number 9. Kirk Douglas. Kirk Douglas built one of the most remarkable careers in Hollywood history. As the star of classics like Spartacus and Paths of Glory, he earned millions, founded his own production company, and became one of the industry's most influential leading men. With that kind of success, many people imagine a grand memorial worthy of a Hollywood legend. Instead, his final resting place is surprisingly modest. After Douglas passed away in 2020 at the age of 103, he was buried at Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles. His grave is marked by a simple flat bronze plaque set into the ground, much like many of the other memorials throughout the cemetery. There are no towering statues, elaborate sculptures, or extravagant displays celebrating a career that spanned more than 6 decades. That simplicity stands in sharp contrast to the extraordinary life he lived. Douglas wasn't only one of Hollywood's highest-paid actors. He also became known for using his influence to challenge the industry's blacklist by publicly crediting screenwriter Dalton Trumbo on Spartacus. Later in life, he and his family donated hundreds of millions of dollars to hospitals, schools, and charitable causes. Perhaps that's why his modest grave feels so appropriate. Rather than leaving behind a lavish monument, Douglas left behind a legacy measured by his films, his principles, and his generosity. Today, visitors can still find his quiet memorial at Westwood, yet despite his immense wealth and legendary status, Kirk Douglas rests beneath one of the simplest graves of any Hollywood icon, proving that the greatest legacy isn't always the one carved in stone. Number 10. James Stewart. James Stewart became one of the most respected actors in Hollywood history. Starring in classics like It's a Wonderful Life, Rear Window, and The Philadelphia Story, he earned millions during a career that lasted more than 5 decades. Yet despite his enormous success and lasting popularity, his final resting place is far more modest than many people expect. After Stewart died in 1997 at the age of 89, he was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. Rather than a grand monument celebrating one of Hollywood's most beloved stars, his grave is marked by a simple bronze plaque in the Stewart family plot. It blends quietly into the surrounding memorials, with little to suggest that one of America's greatest actors rests there. The contrast feels especially fitting. Throughout his career, Stewart was admired not for glamour or extravagance, but for portraying honest, humble, and everyday Americans. Off-screen, he carried that same reputation. He served with distinction as a bomber pilot during World War II, and remained known for his modest lifestyle long after becoming one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Perhaps that's why his grave feels so appropriate. It reflects the quiet dignity that defined both the man and the characters he portrayed, rather than the wealth and fame he accumulated over a lifetime. Today, visitors continue to seek out his memorial at Forest Lawn. Yet despite a career that made him one of Hollywood's most successful leading men, James Stewart rests beneath a simple marker, a reminder that the most enduring legends don't always leave behind the grandest monuments. Asterisk number 11. Asterisk Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford was one of the brightest stars of Hollywood's golden age. An Academy Award winner and one of MGM's most successful leading ladies, she earned millions during a career that lasted for decades. With her glamorous image and legendary status, many people expect her final resting place to be just as extravagant. It isn't. After Crawford died in 1977 at the age of 73, she was cremated and her ashes were placed in Ferncliff Cemetery in Hartsdale, New York. Instead of a lavish monument, her memorial is a simple bronze-fronted niche inside the mausoleum, marked only by her name and dates. It is elegant but remarkably understated for someone who once represented the height of Hollywood glamour. The contrast is striking. Throughout her career, Crawford carefully crafted an image of sophistication and perfection, becoming one of the most recognizable women in American cinema. Yet the place where she rests reflects none of that luxury. It is quiet, dignified, and easy to overlook among the many other memorials inside the mausoleum. Perhaps that simplicity says more than any grand monument could. While public fascination with Joan Crawford has continued through her films and the controversies that followed her death, her final resting place remains calm and deeply personal. Today, movie lovers still seek out her memorial at Ferncliff Cemetery. But despite the fortune she earned and the glamorous life she projected to the world, Joan Crawford's final resting place is surprisingly modest, a reminder that even Hollywood's most dazzling stars often leave behind the simplest memorials. Number 12. Lauren Bacall. Lauren Bacall was one of Hollywood's most sophisticated leading ladies. From her unforgettable debut in To Have and Have, not to a career that spanned more than 70 years, she earned both critical acclaim and considerable wealth. Married to Humphrey Bogart and later celebrated in her own right, Bacall became a lasting symbol of Hollywood's golden age. Many would expect her final resting place to reflect that legendary status. Instead, it is surprisingly modest. After Bacall passed away in 2014 at the age of 89, she was cremated, and her ashes were placed in a simple memorial niche at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. Rather than an elaborate monument honoring one of Hollywood's most recognizable stars, her memorial is understated and blends quietly into the surrounding columbarium. Without knowing where to look, many visitors could easily pass by without realizing she rests there. The contrast is remarkable. For decades, Bacall's unmistakable voice and confident screen presence captivated audiences around the world. Yet the place where she is remembered is calm, private and free of the grandeur often associated with Hollywood legends. Perhaps that quiet simplicity is fitting. Throughout her later years, Bacall focused less on celebrity and more on her craft, her family, and preserving the legacy of classic cinema. Her influence was never measured by monuments, but by the unforgettable performances she left behind. Today, film lovers still visit Forest Lawn to honor her memory. Yet despite a lifetime of fame, fortune and admiration, Lauren Bacall's final resting place remains remarkably modest, a quiet tribute to a woman whose legacy continues to shine far brighter than the memorial bearing her name. Number 13. Dean Martin. Dean Martin was far more than a popular singer. He was a Hollywood movie star, a television icon, and one of the biggest entertainers of his generation. Through hit films, sold-out performances, and years of television success, he earned a fortune that placed him among Hollywood's wealthiest performers. Many would expect his final resting place to be every bit as grand as the life he lived. Instead, it is surprisingly modest. After Martin died in 1995 at the age of 78, he was buried at Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park in Los Angeles. His grave is marked by a simple flat bronze plaque set into the ground, with no towering monument or elaborate memorial to reflect his decades of fame. It quietly blends into the peaceful cemetery, alongside many other Hollywood legends. The simplicity becomes even more meaningful because of the inscription on his marker. It reads, "Everybody loves somebody sometime," the title of his signature hit song that became one of the defining moments of his career. Rather than celebrating his wealth or countless achievements, the memorial simply recalls the music that made millions of people smile. That contrast feels fitting. Martin was known for his effortless charm and relaxed stage presence, but away from the spotlight he valued his privacy and family life. His final resting place reflects that same quiet dignity instead of the glamour that surrounded his career. Today, fans still visit Westwood to pay their respects. Yet despite his enormous success and fortune, Dean Martin rests beneath one of the simplest memorials in Hollywood. A reminder that sometimes a single song can preserve a legacy better than the grandest monument ever could. Number 14. Bette Davis. Bette Davis was one of the most powerful actresses in Hollywood's golden age. A two-time Academy Award winner, she commanded some of the industry's highest salaries and built a career that lasted more than 50 years. With her fame, influence and fortune, many people would expect an elaborate monument to mark her final resting place. Instead, it is surprisingly modest. After Davis died in 1989 at the age of 81, she was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills, California. Rather than a grand memorial, her grave is marked by a simple family headstone that quietly blends into the surrounding cemetery. There are no towering statues or lavish displays celebrating one of Hollywood's greatest actresses. What draws visitors is not the size of the memorial, but the words engraved upon it. She did it the hard way. The phrase reflected Davis's own description of a career built through determination, constant battles with the studio system, and an unwillingness to accept easy success. In just 5 words, the inscription tells more about her life than any grand monument ever could. The contrast is unforgettable. A woman who dominated the silver screen and earned millions during Hollywood's golden age is remembered by a modest grave and a single sentence that captures her entire legacy. Today, admirers continue to visit Forest Lawn to pay their respects. Yet despite her extraordinary success and lasting influence on American cinema, Bette Davis rests beneath one of the simplest memorials among Hollywood's biggest stars, proving that sometimes the most powerful tribute isn't built with marble. It's written in just a few unforgettable words. Number 15. Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby was one of the most successful entertainers of the 20th century. As a legendary singer, movie star, and radio personality, he earned millions and became one of Hollywood's highest-paid performers. His recording of White Christmas remains one of the best-selling songs of all time, making it easy to imagine a grand memorial honoring his extraordinary career. Instead, his final resting place is surprisingly modest. After Crosby died from a heart attack in 1977 at the age of 74, he was buried at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, California. His grave is marked by a simple flat bronze plaque set into the ground with only his name, dates, and a cross. There are no elaborate sculptures or towering monuments to reflect the fame and fortune he accumulated during his lifetime. The simplicity feels especially striking when compared to his influence. Crosby wasn't just a Hollywood star. He helped shape modern popular music, dominated radio for decades, and became one of the first entertainers to build a multimedia empire. Yet the place where he rests is quiet, understated, and almost indistinguishable from the many other memorials surrounding it. Perhaps that understated memorial suits the man himself. Away from the spotlight, Crosby valued family, faith, and a relatively private life, despite his enormous celebrity. Today, visitors still come to Holy Cross Cemetery to honor his memory. Yet, despite becoming one of the wealthiest and most recognizable entertainers of his era, Bing Crosby rests beneath one of the simplest graves on this list. A reminder that lasting influence doesn't always require a lasting monument. The stories we've explored today prove that Hollywood's greatest fortunes didn't always lead to the grandest memorials. Behind the fame, the wealth, and the unforgettable performances, many of these legends chose, or were remembered with quiet, modest resting places that reveal a far more personal side of their lives. Which grave surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments, and if you'd like to discover more remarkable stories behind Hollywood's forgotten resting places, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.